So as you guys know, we just recently got back to Panama City, Panama, from Miami, a benefit weekend. Prior to Miami, we stopped in Dallas to see Micah's mother, as well as there's a family gathering in Houston. So we went to Houston as well, and we saw my brother, saw his family there, and then Miami. This U.S. visit was pretty intense. Definitely emotionally weighing as well as physically. So we left Panama. I can't even remember the date, but anyway, we left Panama. We were supposed to get into Dallas at around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and we flew into Houston first. So our flight was delayed in Houston, and then they canceled the entire flight. So they canceled the entire flight, and they were like, hey, you can come back in the morning, or we can put you on standby for the next flight. The way it was going was they already had our bags, right? Our bags are already on a plane somewhere or something, right? And we also were supposed to be coming back to Houston on a Saturday. So we flew in on a Thursday. We're supposed to be there at the end of the day, that Thursday, that Friday, and then coming back Saturday early in the morning to drive to Houston. So we kind of really needed to get to Dallas. So we go for standby. We missed the standby. They don't pick us for a standby, right? The next one, they're like, okay, you guys would definitely be on this one. You guys are at the top of the list. So we are waiting at the gate. Everybody's already got on the plane, and there's a few standby people around. Well, the lady's going down a list calling names, and you can see the list like above, and she just kind of just starts calling random names and skips over us right before she gets to our name. And so Micah catches it. He's like, hey, like, you skipped us, like. And she's like, what? I said all of the names. Just very rude, very nasty. And when I tell you, there's literally like us and maybe 5 other people that are waiting, and we're all around her. So there's no way that anybody could miss their name, because they're literally standing there listening to you, you know? And she just was really nasty, skipped us, and in the process of her skipping us, she let 2 other people that were way at the bottom of the list get on the plane. And so when she realized it, she knew she messed up. You know how you can like look at somebody and tell that they knew that they kind of messed up? She knew that she did. She just wasn't accepting accountability, because she knew that she would have to go back and kind of fix the problem. And so she was like, well, I only have space for one of y'all, so which one of y'all are gonna come? And I'm like, and what I'm gonna do without him? You know what I mean? I could have stayed in Houston and just got my brother to pick me up from the airport, but he didn't want me to do that. He was like, you just get on the flight. And I'm like, well, babe, the point of us going to Dallas was for you to work on your mom's car, and then we're supposed to be driving down. So it doesn't make sense for me to go, because I can't work on the car. Long story short, neither one of us got on the plane, and so we waited for another one. So at this point, I've been sitting in airport terrible chairs all day, and now bad weather is coming through Houston. So it's the last flight of the day. It's like, I leave at like 10 o'clock or so, and it's delayed. So we're still waiting there. We ended up grabbing some food to eat, but my body is uncomfortable, as you can imagine. The chairs are horrible, the hard seats, all of these things. Long story short, we finally get on the plane. We finally get to Dallas. We end up getting into his mom's house at about 1, 2-ish. I didn't get to bed till 4. And before I go to the bed, I go in the bathroom and I see blood, okay? And so I had saw a little bit of pink something early in the morning before we left, but I wasn't really worried about it. Sometimes, like after sex, it'll be like a little something, but nothing that stays. And even though we didn't have sex around there, I just wasn't really worried about it, because I had asked about that previously as it related to the sex and the pinkish with my doctor before, and it was fine, right? But this time I'm going to the restroom, and I'm like, no, this isn't pink, this is blood. So I'm like, okay, you know, it's been a long day, maybe it's just the stress and the travel. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, let me just lay down. And So I went to bed, got up in the morning and went to the restroom, and there was more blood. It was blood, and I'm just like, all right, now I'm scared, now I'm freaked out. And so I tell Micah, I'm like, hey, like, I'm bleeding. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm bleeding. And so he had pretty much a full day of things to do because his mom's car was broke down. We were supposed to be traveling the next morning, and I was just like, hey. And so he brings me out there to his mom, and we kind of share what's going on. And she prays, and at the end of the prayer, she's just like, she's like, I'm gonna say, just trust that everything is gonna be okay. She said, because that's the first time in a while I've been praying and I didn't have words to say. She said, normally I have something to say that comes to me that God gives me, but I don't really have the words. And so I'm like, okay. And so in the process, like when I woke up in the morning, I first saw the blood, I had sent a message to my doctor here in Panama, which doesn't really speak English at all Spanish, but I looked and I had a message from him. And so Micah was like, well, what did your doctor say? And so the doctor basically said, how soon can you get back to Panama? Like, I need you to get back to Panama so that I can see what's going on with you, because bleeding is not normal. And so I'm like, whoa, like, after all of that, we just get here. Now the doctor is saying I need to come back so that he can check me out. And we're looking at the tickets, and we're like, whoa, these tickets are like $2,000 to get back, like, right now. And then I'm thinking about Emily Fit weekend, and I'm just like, yo, like, I would hate to leave and then everything is okay. And, you know, we already have these tickets to Miami, so all of this money that we've already spent. And I'm like, but I need to make sure that the baby is okay. And Michael brings up his cousin Ebony, who works in a hospital. Dr. Ebony, I believe she's a doctor. And so Micah's mom calls her, and she's like, hey, she's like, no, y'all need to go to the emergency room. She's like, that's not normal. And she said, well, actually, I have a specialist in here. Let me see if I can. As soon as she said that, the lady walks through the door, right? And so she kind of tells her what's going on and explains. And she's like, hey, you know, my cousin has this and this, which, by the way, I loved, because I'm like, oh, she called me cousin. But she kind of tells her what's going on, and they tell me that I need to go to the emergency room. And they give me a specific emergency room, which I cannot remember to save my life at the moment. But when I find it, I will definitely drop it in the caption or the description, because the emergency room was amazing, the doctors were amazing, everything was amazing. So he's like, you know, like, you need to go to the emergency room. And so his mom ends up taking me. He still has a few things to take care of, and I'm just kind of like, I'm kind of freaking out a little bit, because I'm like, oh, I kind of want him to go, but I understand there's still things that had to get done. And I could tell that he wasn't really in the mental place to process what was going on either. I've never seen him be that emotional before. Micah's generally a very, like, you know, happy. Of course, he has emotions like everybody else, but being that, like, emotionally torn, we both were scared. We both were scared because it wasn't like pink. There was blood, and my doctor is saying, no, you need to come back here immediately. They're like, no, you need to go to the emergency room immediately. And so I go, and they do all of these checks. They take blood. They do urine samples. They do not an ultrasound, a sonogram, I believe is what it's called, a sonogram on my stomach. They do a test. They look up in there, and they do a finger test too, to just see if there's anything tender and anything like that. So they test everything. We ended up being in there all day. you know, emergency rooms are always weird. Luckily, we had favor. I started talking to one of the young ladies. You know, she's doing my blood work and everything. And I'm still, you know, being myself and being pleasant, even though I'm scared out of my freaking mind. And I'm talking, and I mentioned that I am living in Panama City, Panama, and that I'm just in Dallas, you know, visiting family. And she's like, oh my gosh. And turns out this lady is from Costa Rica. So, you know, there's Panama and Costa Rica there, like right beside each other. And so she's like asking questions, and she's so excited. And we just started talking about a bunch of random stuff. But anyway, we became like BFFs. So she's like, girl, let me see what I can do. And so she ends up getting us in a room where it would have probably been another hour to 2 hours in the waiting room, honestly. And the doctors come in, they do all of this stuff. During the sonogram, they don't let you see anything. So I'm used to kind of like the ultrasound where you can see what's happening. You can see the baby and everything. You can see the movement, but they have the screen facing them. You can't see anything, and then they can't say anything. So they tell you before you even go in, like, hey, we can't give you any results. We can't tell you what's happening. Nothing. You just lay here. We're going to rub this on you, and we're just going to look at everything. And so I was a little bit scared. I didn't. Now, at this point, I believe, I was at 19 weeks. I was at 19 weeks when this happened. So the lady... So let me rewind a little bit. The lady that I was talking to about Costa Rica and Panama, she was like, she was kind of talking, but you know how somebody's like talking around and they're not really like getting to the point of what they're gonna say. And she was like, well, I don't want to scare you or anything. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Just tell me like what it is. And she said, you're at 19 weeks. At 20 weeks, a baby can survive outside of the mother's body and still have the potential of living. You're at 19 weeks, so we need to do whatever we can to make sure that that baby stays in you until at least 20 weeks. And so I was like, okay. And she said, I'm gonna make that happen. I'm gonna make sure that at least that the baby is good until then. And I had also been feeling that intense pressure and like pulling, which again, I've never been pregnant before. I don't have kids, you know, outside of baby Lobo. So I'm feeling this intense like pressure and pulling, and I'm like, am I about to have this baby? I'm like, what the heck is this? And it's like intense back pains and all of that. So I'm just like, wow, like I don't know. And after all of this happens, they do all of the tests, everything. I'm just laying there waiting. And I remember Micah's mom saying, well, whatever's supposed to happen is gonna happen. And I'm like, no, like I got like so like no, like my baby is gonna be fine. I don't need you to say whatever's supposed to happen is gonna happen. I need you to say everything's gonna be okay, but baby's gonna be fine. So I'm terrified. I'm like freaking out, on edge. And the lady comes back and she's like, hey, everything looks great. The baby is healthy. Your cervix is still closed. She said my placenta was a little bit low, but outside of that, everything is good. And I'm like, okay, well, why am I bleeding? That doesn't explain, because this is real life blood. So what she said was, there's a name for it, but the cells inside of my cervix are turned inside out, right? So the cells that would normally be on the inside are like flipped out this way. So any little thing causes it to bleed. And I'm like, well, you know, I haven't been having sex. I haven't been doing anything. Like, and she was just like, you know, it could be the plane ride, the intense chairs, all of that, and just causing it to bleed. But she said, as far as anything coming from up there, from the baby, everything is all good. You were good to go. And she said, but we did test your urine and you do have a bacterial infection. She said it's a thing sometimes with pregnant women. She gave me an antibiotic to take, and it's really, now that I think about it, and she explained how serious a bacterial infections can be, especially if they like spread to your kidneys or something. It could have an effect on your body, your well-being, and then of course the baby, because it's affecting you. But there was no symptoms at all for any kind of infection, no burning, no itching, no headache, nothing outside of the normal. So I believe maybe I was just supposed to go and needed something physical for me to see, to prompt me to go to the doctor to have that checked out in that way in order to catch that infection, because the infection in the long term could have been bad And being that there's no symptoms, nothing's happened, the baby's healthy, there was no reason for anyone else to test my urine. You know, they test your urine to see if you're pregnant, but clearly I am. So, and if you see a moving baby inside of an ultrasound, there would have been no indicators of the infection. So I got the medication for the antibiotics, and I was just been trying to take it easy because I notice when I get stressed or if I'm moving a lot, or not even moving a lot, if I'm doing intense stuff, right? So exercise is fine. I don't like go to the gym and then leave bleeding or anything like that. But those more intense things like sitting in the chairs awkwardly and a long period of time, the flying and stuff can sometimes be a lot on my body. So I'm taking it easy. But when I tell you I'm so blessed, I'm so blessed because I was scared. I was like, do you mean to tell me that after all of these years of me trying to have a baby and wondering why it wasn't working, I get pregnant only to have something happen to my baby? Like, what the hell? What the hell? Like, I was just like, I don't think God would do that to me. Like that's almost worse than just never being pregnant, you know? And all these things are running in my head, and I'm trying to think positive and like, oh, whatever. But I am just glad that what Michael's mom said before, just trust God. It played out. Everything is okay. The baby is healthy. Since then, we went to the doctor again and had the more intense ultrasound. He has all of his fingers, all of his toes, perfect health. No mental disorders, no Down syndrome, no cleft palate. Everything is all well with his brain and his spine, his physical. He's doing amazing, and that's truly a blessing. Now, after we get this good news, I ended up having to pick up the prescription that day because, again, we were supposed to be leaving the next morning at 6 a.m. And so we were waiting, and I told Micah's mom to go ahead to the car, get some air conditioners, sit down, chill out there, and then to just swing back around to get me. So I get a call from her while I'm sitting and waiting for the prescription, and she's like, Kiki, the car won't cut on. I'm like, what? The car won't cut on. I'm like, oh man, like, did we leave on a light or something? And so I was like, okay, let me reach out to Micah. Let me try to call Micah and let him know to see if he's nearby to give you a jump. And so I call him. He's like, oh man, like he's moving this stuff and doing all of this stuff in storage and everything. And so he's like, okay, let me know. I'll head that way when I finish this. Let me know. And over some time, I'll call her back. And she's like, oh, somebody gave me a jump. And I'm like, okay, great. So we get the prescription. We're about to head out. And so I call him back just to let him know, hey, we don't need you to come anymore. The car is on. We're good. And I call him, I'm like, hey, babe, how's it going? And he goes, not great. I'm like, what? What you mean not great? Like, what's going on? He goes, so something's going on with the brakes. The brakes blew. There's brake fluid all over the storage place. I'm like, what? So instead of him coming to save us, we're like, okay, well, we got to go save him. So we leave. Again, it's 7, almost 8 something. We haven't eaten all day because we've been in the emergency room all day. But we're like, we got to go make sure he's good. You know me, I'm like, I got to go make sure my man is okay. You know, forget this food. And so we get there, and like you said, it's brake fluid all over the storage place. And so I get out the car to kind of help him with a few things. We're putting a few things in his mom's truck, and she cuts off the car. When she cuts off the car doesn't cut back on. So now we have 2 cars. One car that won't start it on, and the other car that has the brake completely blown, brake fluid everywhere. And we are inside this storage little deck that closes and locks up, and anything else in it locks at 10 o'clock. And right now it's like 9. Long story short, we had to find a way to maneuver the cars out through the street to the side of the street. And oh Lord, the cat just came here. What you doing, boys? but we had to maneuver ourselves to the street, okay? And luckily, my dad still had me on AAA, even though I live in Central America, which is the GoDaddy, okay? So we ended up getting both cars. Hey, nope. Come here. Come here. Come on. We ended up getting both cars towed back to the house. So there was another 4 a.m. night, all right? So first 2 days in the U.S. was intense. Ended up going to Miami. Miami was great. The class was great. I don't know the numbers, but I think I had one of the biggest classes. So that was dope. And now he is rubbing on my stand. All right, y'all. It's time to go. Miami was great. The class was great. It was intense coming to the U.S., but it all turned out to be good. So, peace out. Until next time. Bye.